So you've watched all of my videos on implantation so far. Implantation symptoms, early pregnancy symptoms, how to support implantation, even the recent one about the difference between implantation bleeding and your period. And you still have questions. That's okay, lots of you did, so I'm covering the most common questions I get asked in this video about implantation bleeding. Hello lovelies, and welcome to another one of my videos in which I'll be answering your most common questions about implantation bleeding. I recently did a video on the difference between implantation bleeding and your period, but I understand that there's still some questions that you may have, and so I'm answering the most common questions that you've asked me so far in this video. If you want to skip ahead to the question you have and the answer, then have a look in the description below because I'll put in timestamps. All right, let's get into this. I have put all your questions in a little document and printed it out so we can be efficient. I like efficient. The first question is, if I don't get implantation bleeding, does it mean I'm not pregnant? Well, it doesn't. I've already said this in previous videos, but implantation bleeding only happens for 1 in 3 pregnancies. So it doesn't even happen for every pregnancy if you've had it before. So no, if you don't have implantation bleeding, it doesn't mean you're out. Here's another question. I kind of covered this in the last video, but still I get this question a lot, so let's talk about it. My bleeding is heavy. Could it still be implantation bleeding? Well, most likely not. Definitely look at all the other signs of whether it's implantation bleeding or your period. You're probably going to find out that this heavy bleeding is most likely not implantation bleeding. You would expect more something like spotting, and it can go on for several days, but it won't be heavy like a proper flow. Here's a fun one. People asking me if I got implantation bleeding. I didn't. Can I get a positive test before I have implantation bleeding? Nope, you can't, because the HCG that you pick up on with a pregnancy test only starts to go up after the egg is implanted. Basically, your body doesn't really know that it's pregnant until the egg has actually implanted. So the egg implants, and then you get the implantation bleeding, and about 3 to 4 days later, you'll be able to pick up on the risen HCG hormone in your urine through a pregnancy test. There's another question. Can implantation bleeding happen after your period is due? Well, yes and no. It depends on whether you chart or not. If you do chart and you know when you have ovulated, then you know implantation bleeding should happen between 6 and 12 days after your ovulation has happened. So if your period is then due and then you get bleeding, nope, won't be implantation bleeding, because if it takes the fertilized egg that long to get to your uterus, it won't have survived to be able to implant and cause the implantation bleeding. Now, if you don't chart your cycle, you really should, first of all, but if you don't, then it's possible that you ovulated later than you're used to. So when your period is due, might not actually be when your period is due. That might be the moment that you are most used to having your period, but you might only be a couple of days after ovulation. And then it is possible that the spotting you're getting is actually implantation bleeding. I already have a positive pregnancy test and I'm still bleeding or spotting. Is this implantation bleeding? No, if you already have a positive pregnancy test, then the bleeding has another reason. And you know what? Bleeding in pregnancy is not uncommon at all. It can happen your entire pregnancy, but it's especially common in the first trimester. But if it happens after you already have your positive test, then it's not due to implantation. There's another reason, as I said. If you're worried, then definitely get in touch with your health practitioner to talk about it. Can you get a positive test while you are spotting before your period is due? Nope, because if the spotting is due to implantation, it's going to take a couple of days before the HCG levels have risen for you to be able to pick it up on in a pregnancy test, as I said several times in this video already. And if the spotting is because it is your period that is announcing itself, then you're not pregnant, so your pregnancy test wouldn't be positive either. If, however, the spotting is happening after your period is due, then there could be another reason for the spotting. So in that case, it is possible for you to get a positive test and be spotting, but it would be after your period is due. And again, it kind of depends on whether you're charting or not. If you are charting, you know when you ovulated, then you definitely know when your period was due. If you haven't been charting, then it's very difficult for you to actually predict when your period would be due. So then the spotting could still actually be implantation bleeding and you wouldn't get a positive pregnancy test. So again, you have to wait it out. The only way for you to be able to figure it out properly is really if you chart. I really hope that this answers your most common questions. And if you want to learn more about implantation and how to support implantation, definitely click on the playlist on your screen right now. And if you haven't subscribed already, but you would love to learn more about fertility and how to boost your fertility naturally, then hit the notification bell and the subscribe button as well for you to be notified every Thursday when I upload new content. And in the meantime, see you in the next video. Bye!